St. Patrick has long been recognised as a patron saint of Ireland, but St. Patrick's Day as we know it today is more of a celebration of all things Irish. It is a day for stew, shamrocks, children running around the streets with ginger beards on, and adults getting drunk in the middle of the afternoon with little to no judgment. But what is it really all about, and why is St. Patrick so intrinsically tied to the city of Armagh? Well, let's find out. So let's begin this video with a quick little look at who exactly St. Patrick was. St. Patrick was a 5th century Roman British Christian missionary and bishop in Ireland. As mentioned at the start of this video, Patrick is the primary patron saint of Ireland, along with St. Bridget of Kildare and St. Columba. As is often the case with many historical figures that date back as early as the work of St. Patrick, the exact dates of his life can't be said with any great degree of certainty. However, the general agreement among scholars is that much of his life and work took place within the 5th century. Patrick was born at the end of the Roman rule in Britain. His place of birth is not known, but some traditions now place it in what we would know as modern-day England. One account, and possibly one of the most accepted one by scholars today, placed Patrick's birth at an area known as Glenovienta, known today as Ravenglass in Cumbria. However, it is important to state that this is contested, with many scholars arguing that his birthplace is in an area of Birdswald, 20 miles east of Carlisle on Hadrian's Wall, with others arguing that he hails from Kilpatrick in Scotland, and others claim it to be South Wales. As you can see, there is quite a lot of discussion on the topics of the origins of the man who would become St. Patrick. However, there are some details that we do know. Patrick's father was a man named Calpurnius, and he was described as holding the position of senator and tax collector in an unspecified Roman British city. And we also know that his grandfather, named Potius, held the position of a priest. From this information, we can gather that Patrick was at the very least a 3rd generation Christian, although it is very interesting to note that Patrick confessed himself that in his youth he was not an active believer. A lot of the information that we know about the man and his life come from 2 letters that are generally accepted to have been penned by Patrick himself. The first of these 2 texts contains a short first-hand account of his life and a statement of his mission. In the autobiographical Confessio, which was Latin for their declaration, Patrick writes about how he was captured and taken away by Irish pirates who brought him from his home in Britain over to Ireland, made him a slave, where he was tasked with the job of looking after animals. And it was actually in this slavery that he spent 6 years of his life before he managed to escape and return back to his home. After he returned home, Patrick became a cleric and then decided to return to Northern and Western Ireland with the mission of spreading the word of Christianity. Patrick is known as the Enlightener of Ireland, and despite some evidence of earlier Christian presence within Ireland, Patrick is the man who is credited with bringing Christianity to what was previously an Irish pagan society. The most commonly known iconography that is used with St. Patrick are the shamrock and also the banishing of the snakes from Ireland. Much like the teachings of Jesus in the Bible, legend credits Patrick with using the 3-leafed plant as a parable to teach the pagans about the Christian idea of the Holy Trinity. The tale of Patrick banishing the venomous snakes from Ireland was first mentioned in the book The Life of St. Columba. This book was written in the late 7th century or possibly the early 8th century, but it is important to note that the Irish saint mentioned in this story, who is credited with chasing the venomous snakes from Ireland, is unnamed in this text. However, a few centuries later, a more familiar account of this story did come in the form of a text by holy writer Jocelyn of Furness. In this account, Furness recalls the tale of how St. Patrick drove all of the venomous snakes out of Ireland by driving them into the sea after they attacked him when he was engaging in a 40-day fast that he took on top of a hill. Although it is important to say that it is widely contested that venomous snakes ever lived in Ireland, and another example of a parable being used could be the idea that the venomous snakes in the story are simply there to represent the idea of Patrick driving paganism out of Ireland by spreading the word of Christianity. So as I mentioned at the top of this video, St. Patrick is a man who is very intrinsically linked to the city of Armagh, and if you've been watching the content that I upload over here on the channel, or if you've seen any of the artwork that I upload onto my Instagram page, you'll know that I am from the city of Armagh myself, and a lot of the artwork that I produce is very much centred around the town itself, so I was very excited to sit down and share a little bit of the story and the history of the city of Armagh and how it's so linked to the man that we're celebrating today. So after years spent working as a shepherd in the Slemish mountain area of County Antrim, Patrick returned to begin his crusade to bring Christianity to the Irish. He is reported to have initially landed in the Strangford Lough area of County Down, but it was in Armagh that he built a stone church which he hoped would become the centre of Irish Christianity. Now, before I get into a lot of the specifics of this history, I think it's very important for me to mention that there are quite a lot of names and Irish words used in this, and as not a native Gaelic speaker, I might butcher some of them, but I'm going to give them a good go. So very sorry if this is terribly offensive to any native Irish speaker, but I will do my best. According to the 7th century writer Murchu in the Book of Armagh, when Patrick arrived in Armagh, he had to deal with a local chieftain, Daire. It was Patrick's wish to build his church upon the hill, Ard Maha, or the height of Maha, the hill from which Armagh takes its name. However, Daire had other ideas and instead suggested an alternative site, which is close to today's Scotch Street, where it is believed that Patrick built his first church. After some time, Daire relented and instead decided that Patrick could build his church on the original site, and in 445 AD, Patrick began work on this church, which to this day, the cathedral still stands. Patrick and his followers dug a ditch around the new church as a way to symbolise that inside its walls, sanctuary will be offered to local Christians. However, in the years and centuries that would follow, there would be little protection for the growing settlement that Patrick had founded, not even from the church itself. Raids by Vikings were a frequent part of life at this time in Armagh. Between 831 and 1013, the city was plundered on 10 separate occasions by Viking forces, and a further 2 times with the help of Irish forces as well. In fact, there was actually a 4-year period where Vikings occupied the city, and in that time they drove out the abbot from the church. In the year 1004, the greatest of the Irish High Kings, Brian Boru, travelled to the church to make an offering of gold at its altar, and in doing so formally recognised it as the centre of Christianity in Ireland. 10 years after this offer was made, and having then inflicted the final defeat on the Vikings, Brian Boru was killed at the Battle of Clontarf. From swords just outside of Dublin along the ancient road that linked the royal site of Ireland, an enormous funeral procession bore his body to the church that is now known as St Patrick's Church of Ireland Cathedral for burial. You can see a plaque which commemorates this momentous occasion in the cathedral grounds where his body is buried. A statue of Brian Boru, created by Mayo sculptor Rory Breslin, was erected in the cathedral's beautiful walled gardens in 2015. In 1268, the then Archbishop of Armagh designed the cathedral that we know today. In this design, he created a large crypt which, in its early days, was used to store jewels and the valuables of the local people. The arrival of Archbishop Robinson to Armagh in 1765, who is known as the second founder of Armagh, saw a new role for the crypt after a striking restoration of the cathedral. Archbishop Robinson converted a bay of the crypt to act as a tomb for his brother William and himself, and Archbishop Bresford is also buried here. The cathedral was then restored again in 1834, just before building began on the new Roman Catholic St Patrick's Cathedral nearby. There are numerous features of interest to explore within St Patrick's Cathedral, including an 11th century Celtic cross, to beautiful silverware and many sculptures from different eras. Today, both St Patrick's Church of Ireland Cathedral and St Patrick's Roman Catholic Cathedral draw visitors from all around the world, and Patrick's vision has been proudly realised. Armagh of the 2 cathedrals is truly the centre of Irish Christianity. So now that we have covered a lot of the history of St Patrick and his significance here in the city of Armagh, and seeing as this is a little bit of a St Patrick's Day special, we have arranged to have a little bit of a tour of the Church of Ireland St Patrick's Cathedral. So we're going to head over to a lot of the footage that I take there as we get to have a little bit of a walk around in the building that St Patrick helped build. And these are the beautiful gardens that sit on the site of St. Patrick's Cathedral here at the top of the hill. And as you can see, it's an absolutely gorgeous place. If you could imagine the 2 or 3 sunny days that we get here in Ireland every year, that you could imagine just how gorgeous these gardens can be. But alas, the sun has not blessed us with its presence today. But it is just such a wonderful place, incredibly peaceful. Yeah, just absolutely wonderful. So we were here having a quick little look around the cathedral here. It is the St. Patrick's Church of Ireland Cathedral. The cathedral on the hill stood on the same site as the original church built by St. Patrick, and it's quite incredible. You really do feel when you walk around here that you are walking through history. This is a cathedral and a building that has stood here for 1,600 years old, and you can certainly see that every single corner, every wall, every space of this building is just surrounded and steeped in Irish history. I do feel that it is certainly a building that is a testament to the mission that St. Patrick had started out with when he had the idea of Armagh becoming the centre of Irish Christianity. You get to walk into this magnificent building with its incredible architecture, and you do get to see just all the different ages and eras of Irish history and the history that has went on with the building itself through all of the conflict, the wars, the raids, the repeated burning downs of the building. But to stand here and know that this is a building that has, much like St. Patrick's mission and his ideals and his legacy, has also stood the test of time. It has always been rebuilt. It has always been a place of worship, and still to this day is an active house of worship. So it is really fantastic. We've had a really, really great time popping down here today to learn a little bit more and to stand on the ground where St. Patrick himself built his church here in Armagh. While we were being taken around on a little guided tour of the cathedral itself, I actually didn't know that this piece here was one of the pieces that was housed here in the cathedral. This is actually a stone idol that is known as the Tandragee Man, and quite amazingly this piece has actually been dated to around about 3,000 years ago, and it is just absolutely incredible to see this stone sculpture, this idol that has just existed for such a long time, that has its safekeeping. And I think much like the idea that we had mentioned in our video, that the cathedral initially, they had used the crypts here in the building to store relics and jewels. It's so great to see that even to the present day, so many years later, that this is still the case. And you do have these incredible, not just relics, but just culturally and historically significant pieces of art housed here for safekeeping and for everyone to come and see. So I think that's pretty incredible. But this, you just can't, you can't look in any single direction without seeing something just unbelievably beautiful and of such historic importance. It is pretty amazing. And then behind me here we actually have, I'll try and get it all in because it is quite a large piece. This is the stone sculpture that I had mentioned in the video, which is housed here in the cathedral. It is the stone sculpture of a Celtic cross, which absolutely incredible when you see it face to face like this. The actual sculpture itself, the carvings on this sculpture depict the tale of Noah's Ark, which is quite fascinating. You actually see here, this would be the actual carving of the boat itself. Of course, not everybody at those times would have been able to read. It wasn't something that normal people were able to do. So what they would have done is create these sculptures in order to share these stories and to teach Christianity. And it's just quite a fantastic piece. This other stone piece, I believe, was actually part of the original Celtic cross here. And I think if we look at the detailing in it, what you can see is actually the depiction of the flood itself from the story of Noah's Ark. So pretty amazing. Another very interesting piece of information that we learned from our lovely tour guide, Stu, was the fact that if you stand at the very bottom of the cathedral where I'm stood at the moment and you look directly up the aisle of the church, you'll notice that the church itself isn't exactly straight. It is slightly crooked towards the top once you get to the altar, which quite interesting in terms of the architecture. I think you would think that most buildings like this, you do expect them to be built with such precision, but it isn't actually any kind of mistake. The reason that this was built, the actual shape of the building itself and the architecture was used to try and reflect the image of Jesus on the cross, and so that slight tilt at the very top was actually meant to represent the head of Jesus as he was on the cross, which was tilted off to the side. So it does show, even when you think about how many hundreds of years ago that the shape that the building is that we stand in today was made, the fact that there was so much thought and effort put into making sure that there was even symbolism in the architecture itself is just truly fantastic. One of the unfortunate things is we are not actually going to be able to get down into the crypts today. Unfortunately, there had been some issues with lighting, transformers had blown, and just at the moment it's deemed not safe to have people down visiting. And of course, without the lack of lighting, it doesn't show off the crypt in the best light, and so hopefully that is going to be getting repaired within the next couple of weeks. So we might take another little trip up, possibly in one of the vlogs where we do go up and check out the crypt, because it is something that I am very, very eager to go and see. But just make sure that you keep checking back, because I definitely will be going to get into that crypt. It is a strange feeling, and I think that it's something that I'm not alone in having. But there is something about, whether you're a religious person, a spiritual person, an atheist, whatever it might be, when you do step into a church or a cathedral or a building of this nature, there is certainly a sense of a calmness and a peace that you do feel regardless of belief. And I've also thought it was such an unusual thing, and is it perhaps just the grandeur of these buildings itself is quite a humbling experience to stand in something that architecturally and from a artistic and designerly point of view is just an incredibly beautiful place to be in. But when you know the history and how long ago that the building has existed, that you do kind of think of people, quite wrongly, I think so many of us think that, you know, back in history people weren't, we're not as advanced as we are today, and we probably think a little bit too highly of ourselves at times. But when you do stand in a building like this and you see the craftsmanship and the love and the care and the attention to detail that has went into these buildings, it is quite a humbling experience. And I think perhaps that is what that feeling is. And there we are. That is the end of our little St. Patrick's Day special here on the Shibbury Studios YouTube channel. It was a lot of fun actually doing something a little bit different here on the channel. It was nice to come and film here on location and to do the research and learn a little bit more about the man that we celebrated this time of year and his lasting legacy here in Armagh City. If you've enjoyed the video, if you find it in any way interesting or informative, do make sure that you are subscribing to the channel. It really does make a big difference. And of course, like the video, share it, put it up all over your social medias. It really makes a difference in terms of getting the content that we make here out to as many people as possible. So before we say goodbye for this video, I would just like to leave you with a bit of information that I will be uploading a brand new illustration onto my Instagram page on St. Patrick's Day itself. It's very much influenced by St. Patrick, his legend, and the city of Armagh itself. So if you've enjoyed the video here, do make sure to head on over. I put the link to all of the social media stuff down in the description of this video, so head over, check out the piece of work. I will be getting prints ready. It will be available on the Etsy store, which again is linked below, along with all of the other prints that we have available. So do head over, support what we're doing here, and I will see you again in the next one. Happy St. Patrick's Day.